Hey everybody, it's Cass and Court TV. It's your girl, Miss Public Info, here with a special edition of the weekend Cass and Court TV episode, a weekend episode, and night court at that. So here we are today. We wanted to come to you. It was a very busy Saturday for Miss Public Info for everybody here at Cass and Court TV. So I'm sure it was for everyone else, but we wanted to make sure we got the news in today. We have a couple of things to talk about today. We're going to talk about Donald Trump. We're going to talk about Gary Busey, and we're going to talk about Big Perm from Friday, Faison Love. It's a lot going on here, and we're going to hop right into it now. Last episode, I talked about Donald Trump. I talked about the potential pardoning that could occur for one Sean Diddy Combs as it relates to his old pal, Donald Trump, who is now the president of the United States. Now, it has been my prediction that he would not pardon him. As we said before, it's probably going to have to do with the fact that he's sort of in the muck in this Jeffrey Epstein mess. However, like all Donald Trump news, he continues to surprise us. Now, he didn't surprise Cass and Court TV with his sort of new his newfound opinion on the Sean Combs situation. Previously, you recall that he said, "Oh, I think he's been treated a little bit unfairly." The headlines read, "Oh, Donald Trump is seriously considering pardoning Sean Combs." I believe one of the headlines I read on TMZ yesterday even said that Combs could be out by the weekend. It even said, but Donald J. Trump, that is, he shut all of that down yesterday when he was talking to a political pundit on Newsmax, and he talked about his pardoning or potential pardoning of Sean Combs. Now, he said it's old blood things. It boils down to the old blood. It boils down to Sean Combs being very vocal, negatively vocal about Donald Trump's presidential run back in 2017, or back actually not run once he was elected there in 2017. He actually told the Daily Beast that he did not really, and I quote, really give a F about Donald Trump. And then in 2020, when Trump's first presidency ended with Joe Biden taking office, Combs went back and told Charlemagne the God on the Breakfast Club. Those of you who are faithful listeners may recall this, but he told Charlemagne at that point, in quote, white men like Trump need to be banished. Now, if you think that Donald Trump is going to forget any of this, he's not. And believe me, folks, on the Newsmax show where he was interviewed, just yesterday, he has not forgotten. And I want to go on to some of these quotes that Sean Combs made about Donald Trump during this time. We know that Donald Trump never forgets an enemy or anyone who is not loyal to him. So he says he's had many a run in with so many people. We saw what he did to Steve Bannon. We saw what he did to James Comey. We saw what he did with a lot of people from his cabinet. Look at Omarosa. I mean, she was with him from the Apprentice days on down to the his time in office, and Omarosa ended up having to sneak in to sort of get photos, even in the presidential rose garden. She was booted from the White House after a while, and Donald Trump was the booter. Okay, so Sean Combs also is quoted as saying the number one priority is to get Donald Trump out of office. Now, he alluded to these comments, meaning President Trump alluded to these comments in an interview that he did just yesterday on Newsmax when he was asked to revisit the concept of partnering Sean Combs. He said the following. He said, when I ran for office, he was very hostile. He went on to say, it's hard, we're human beings and we don't like to have things cloud our judgment, right? But when you knew someone and you were fine, and then you run for office and he made some terrible statements. So I don't know. It makes it more difficult to do, end quote. Now, Castle Court TV, Miss Public Info told you yesterday that I really didn't feel that Donald Trump was going to pardon Sean Combs. I felt like, based upon this sort of Epstein muck that he's in and him trying to please his base who does not like Sean Combs. And I also mentioned the fact that Sean Combs, staunchly campaigned for both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and is an ambassador of the Voter Die campaign, which is very closely affiliated with the Democratic Party. And the fact that he cut ties with Trump as soon as Donald Trump announced his presidential run with the Republican Party, I felt like Donald Trump wasn't going to pardon him. We know that President Trump is King Petty among all. He is King Petty. So, we're not talking about someone who who doesn't hold these sorts of things very seriously. He does. He holds his loyalty seriously. People who have his back, friends of his, people who are loyal to him, people who have had his back and have campaigned on his behalf, they get jobs even though they're not qualified for the job, but because they've had his back and been loyal, they get the job. And the same works the other way. If you don't have his back, if you're not loyal, if you say inflammatory things about Donald Trump, if you do these things, Donald Trump is not going to have your back. And it seems that this is what is happening with one Sean Diddy Combs in his hour of need, in the ninth hour, in the ninth inning stretch, even in the 11th hour. He is in need of a pardoning and in order to sort of get an acquittal, or not even an acquittal, but that's the only way he's going to see the vacation of these counts that are against him is a presidential pardon. And it doesn't seem that Donald Trump is going uh, to break on this. I just don't see it. And after his interview on Newsmax yesterday, I really don't see it. We're going to stay tuned and stay close to this to see what actually ultimately ends up happening. But I got to say, guys, it's not looking hopeful for one Sean Diddy Combs. Okay. Now, what is going on with Big Perm? Okay, you guys are wondering, like, okay, Big Perm, we ain't heard him. I haven't heard from him in a while. This is Faison Love, of course, who is known for a lot of roles. Of course, his role in Elf, his role on The Parenthood, a '90s sitcom with Robert Townsend, but also he is known best in certain circles for playing Big Perm on the iconic film Friday. And it seems that uh, Faison Love, back in earlier, I think it's in 2022, Faison Love assaulted a woman with a credit card reader. Now, let's get into this because this is a very interesting case. And when I say assaulted, this is a physical assault, a felony physical assault. And I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about what these things mean in the court process because this is a little bit of some school as it relates to the law. So in February, actually, it was not in 2022. My apologies, 2025, earlier this year. In February, he was charged with a felony assault incident at a hotel. The hotel clerk apparently he threw a credit card reader at her head, and the police were called, and there were some witnesses that were there. Now, apparently, he had made a hotel reservation with a third party app, and once he got to the hotel clerk proceeded to let him know that there were no vacancies at the hotel. Now, that is a very frustrating thing. I probably would be very frustrated by that. But he took it to the ultimate degree. He began to berate the staff. They said that all of this, according to Black Enterprise, he berated the staff. He went on to, ask them, or assert rather, don't you know who I am? Sort of pushing his weight around as a known actor, film and television actor. And the hotel clerk sort of hopped in. I think she was the manager of the people that were there. She hopped in and she said, you can't talk to them like this, that sort of thing. And that only sort of probably exasperated the frustration that I'm sorry, that Faison Love was actually, feeling at the time. Now, once, he became frustrated, he threw the credit card reader at her. It hit her in the head. Then he was charged subsequently with felony assault with a deadly weapon with a sentence enhancement for inflicting great bodily injury. Now, I want to talk about the charge because people may have questions about why or how he is charged with felony assault with a deadly weapon. A credit card reader isn't necessarily a deadly weapon, but according to the law, a deadly weapon doesn't have to be a gun or a knife for that matter. It can be anything that you can use, that one could use to potentially end the life of someone else. And a credit card reader, the fact that it is probably bigger than an iPhone, but not much bigger, but definitely it's denser than an iPhone. The fact that a credit card reader, based on its density and its size, if hitting someone if you hit someone in the head hard enough, and he threw the thing, could actually end the life of someone. It's called blunt force trauma. Get hit someone in the head, cause a brain bleed, and that person could ultimately pass because of this particular incident. And so that is the reason he was charged with the felony assault with a deadly weapon. It is a sentence enhancer. So I've talked in the past about sentence enhancement and what that really means. So sometimes with a lot of these cases, there'll be a sentence enhancer attached to it. I've talked about it previously as it relates to children, crimes against children under the age of 10 or under the age of 8 or whatever it might be. But this also applies to cases like this when there is a weapon used that could cause great bodily injury. So in this particular case, because he used something of great force and the way in which he utilized it by chucking it at her head specifically is where he aimed it, then that is a sentence enhancer based upon the fact that this particular incident, this particular crime could actually cause great bodily injury. So this is sort of the step down from like something like attempted manslaughter or attempted murder or something like that. Certainly, there are not the elements for that in this particular incident, but a felony assault is on the seriousness of that, on the edge of that seriousness, based upon the fact that he is utilizing something that he could have ended her life with, but fortunately for both parties that didn't happen. Now, yesterday in court, there was a preliminary hearing, and I talked to you guys about these preliminary hearings. Usually, this is where the court sort of decides whether or not this case is going to be bound over to the higher criminal court, the district court. For trial, or they're sort of deciding whether there is enough evidence to actually bind this case over for trial. And in this particular case, they did. The judge decided that there was enough evidence to bind this case over for trial. And I believe that I'm sorry, I want to call him Donald Faison so bad, but Faison Love, shouts out to Donald Faison, but Faison Love, he obviously had pled not guilty for this, and so he's basically saying he wants to go to trial if there was enough evidence, and the judge decided yesterday that there was indeed enough evidence to proceed to trial. Now, let's talk about the victim in this case, because Faison Love's attorneys say that there are some circumstances regarding this case that say that this isn't as clean and cut and dry as it may seem. And this is sort of what his attorney used as a defense to say that this case should not be bound over to trial, that it didn't qualify. I'm going to read a little bit from my notes here, so bear with me. But his attorney suggested that the clerk may have been motivated by financial gain. She's already filed a civil suit seeking compensation for medical expenses and emotional trauma. In quote, he says, I think there's quite a bit of motivation for her to make this up, to exaggerate. Despite his arguments, of course, the Judge Zampanta, found there was enough probable cause to proceed. He was arraigned, and then a trial was scheduled for January of 2026. If he is convicted, he faces up to 7 years. But his attorney goes on to say that he's challenging the testimony of two of her co-workers who said that they witnessed the attack. He says that one admitted he didn't actually see the clerk get hit in the head. Only he only admitted to actually hearing the sound. He, in quote, he said, what should give the court pause is in the insufficiency of the evidence and the credibility of the witnesses. He also suggested, uh, he continued to suggest the financial gain factor of this. Of course, the civil cases usually come after the criminal case has been resolved. Obviously, with the criminal case, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. And I talked to you guys about how that differs from the civil case, which is a 50. They've only got to really convince that jury that 50% of proof is there. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. But usually, when a criminal case has been uh, found to be usually when a defendant rather has been found guilty in a criminal case and there is a proceeding civil case against that person, it's that much easier to win that civil case for the plaintiff who's suing them civilly. So that's something to think about there. He goes on to say, actually, this is actually what I want to quote. Actually, the clerk, the clerk, she sort of gave testimony during this prelim hearing, determining whether or not there was going to be a trial. And she went on to say, Mr. Love was extremely upset. It was 0 to 100 real quick, she told the court. He was repeatedly asking if we knew who he was. She said that she told Faison Love that his behavior was unacceptable before he allegedly pulled the credit card reader off the counter and hurled it at her. And quote, Mr. Love looked directly at me, pulled the credit card machine off, and threw it at my head, she says. So there you have it. He's facing up to 7 years if he's convicted. Obviously, he's facing this civil lawsuit as well, from the hotel clerk that he chucked the credit card reader at. I have a very petty question, even though all of this is alleged. But what hotel uses a credit card reader anymore? Like one of those old school ones when they do. I thought everyone did basically everything computerized, digitized, or I'm not trying to minimize her experience, her alleged experience, or her or the alleged attack. I'm not trying to minimize any of that because this is very serious and he could have caused great bodily harm, and obviously he should be held responsible. And really, he deserves his day in court, which he's going to get, and it's up to a jury to decide whether or not there's enough evidence to say he really did do these things and convict him. But I'm just wondering how folks are still utilizing a credit card reader. That is really weird to me. I have frequented hotels very recently on a recent trip, and everything was digitized. There was no reader or anything, no like credit card reader or anything like that. So I'm a little confused by that, unless it was the kind of reader that they have now that's electronic, and you like the ones that are like independent, they just sit there, but they're attached to like a little wire, and they just sit there and you just put your card in. Maybe they're talking about one like that. I'm a geriatric millennial, so when they said a credit card reader, I'm automatically thinking of the old school ones, the ones that's like you do that, back in the day, and they give you the carbon copy of the credit card receipt thing, and you sign that, and I'm just like, who uses that anymore? That's just so bizarro to me, right? Crazy. Oh my goodness. Okay. Gary Busey, ladies and gentlemen. Now we know Gary Busey is an interesting character. We have seen Gary Busey get into some trouble. We've seen him sort of, act a fool, here and there. And he's been arrested quite a few times as it relates to some of his uh, some of his antics out here in the world. But what happened to Gary Busey in 2022 was that he was at a convention called let me get this name right, guys, the Monster Mania Convention is what it's called. And at the Monster Mania Convention, Gary Busey was there taking photos, being part of the fandom. He's having a good time. But while he was there, the people say he had too good of a time. He was said to have groped several women while he was there. This is back in I believe August of 2022 in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He was accused of groping several women. Um, he was actually indicted for this crime. So again, an indictment. They got in the secret jury, and they presented evidence, and they brought in different witnesses who witness what was going on. Again, guys, the indictment is basically the grand jury indictment is, excuse me, is basically the practice of bringing in a secret jury so we can actually parse out information, different evidence, so we can see if this person is actually a crime has been committed here. It's not rather the person that did the crime, it's rather if there has been a crime committed. So usually we see these with much more serious cases, but not to say this isn't serious. We don't like any of, criminal sexual contact or anything like that. But usually this is like when you see the murder one cases or something like that. But in this particular case, this is criminal sexual contact by Gary Busey. They brought in a grand jury to actually judge this evidence. And again, a grand jury is a secret jury that they bring in. No one knows this is going on. I'll repeat again for those of you who didn't hear me when I was talking about this in previous episodes, but when I was at the district attorney's office, there were many times that I didn't know that we were actually convening a grand jury indictment or a grand jury hearing or anything like that, because it is this a secret grand jury trial, if you will, because everything about it is sort of shrouded in secrecy. So people aren't even supposed to know. They don't even know the jury that they end up picking. They don't know until they're actually picked that they are actually there. The jury pool is actually there to participate in a secret grand jury for an indictment. That's how sort of secret and locked down it is. Many people at the district attorney's office, except for the actual DAs that are handling it, don't know. The actual elected DA, the DA that's in charge of the whole office, they might know, but not everyone. Everyone else doesn't know. They don't know. Even certain court staff and people, they don't even know that a grand jury, a secret jury, is actually convening. So in this particular case, it could have been because they didn't have enough enough evidence on hand to actually charge the case, to come up with a viable probable cause or arrest affidavit, that they decided to convene a grand jury to see if a crime had been committed, and the grand jury said that a crime had been committed, and that's how we came up with this whole thing. That's how we came up with the indictment, and that is the reason Mr. Gary Busey just yesterday was in court. Now, previously, this happened in 2022, but sources say previously he pleaded not guilty to this case. But yesterday, he pleaded guilty to this case, and he just sort of fell on his sword with it. He said he's going to plead guilty. He's done with it, and he wants to get on with his life. This is now been set for sentencing for 9/18, September 18th. But there's a little issue with with his defense. His defense said, "Excuse me, we don't think that this should even be going to this case should not even be like here. This case needs to be dismissed. His attorney was very vocal about the fact that there was a lack of witnesses, including the photographer who actually had his camera trained on Gary Busey the entire evening, who says that he did not see Gary Busey touch or grope any women. He said, so I don't know what this is even about. But again, that is why the grand jury was convened. And the grand jury, as I have noted to you guys in previous episodes about other cases, the reason partly that you bring in a grand jury is so that you can introduce evidence that you would not normally be able to introduce this early. So according to the grand jury, there were enough witnesses, there was enough evidence, and they did have what they had. Now, maybe, I don't know where Gary Busey's attorney is sort of coming up with this information about the photographer not seeing anything. Maybe that's something he just told them, but apparently at the grand jury, during the grand jury trial, there was enough evidence to bind this thing over and to indict Gary Busey. Now, Gary Busey has had a troubled past. Of course, there's all kinds of notations of Gary, sort of the DUI situation and all sorts of things. He's a beloved actor. He's 81 years old. Imagine having this sort of turmoil that you're going through legally at at 81 years old. You lived off this time. What are you doing? He's still, partying. He's still doing the thing. Gotta settle down, guys. Gotta settle down. Gotta settle down. So now sentencing is set for September 18th, and he will move on from there. But he has pleaded guilty, and he will be sentenced. He was admonished by the judge uh, for eating and drinking during the hearing. The judge was not having it, and she told him, listen, you're not allowed to do that. Please don't eat and drink during these proceedings. So Gary Busey is kind of a loose cannon, even at 81 years of age. He is just somebody that probably just won't ever get it together. Oh my goodness. Well, that's it for Cast and Court TV for this Saturday evening. Thanks so much, guys. We may come back tomorrow if there are any developments with this Donald Trump pardoning situation here, or any developments with the Combs case or anything related to that. But I appreciate you rocking with me. This is been your girl, Miss Public Info. We'll see you next time and the next episode of Cast and Court TV. All right, guys. Peace.